You wait 90 years for a win to come along, and then two come along at once. But you want to know how those wins came about. Race 1, Kiwis off the foils. How did that happen? Who made the decisions? The second race was a cracking ding-dong. Great pre-start, which we're going to delve into a few of the communications on the INEOS boat. Pretty close race by the finish. Kiwis coming back really strong. So we're just going to have a look at what the race data says about the yacht performances, kind of work out our INEOS kind of really on a gain. This is the first race. The only thing to really note here that kind of leads them to this situation is they're pretty down speed on their build, like 25, 26 knots. INEOS coming in, charging, and honestly, you know, for my armchair sitting at home, I thought they were easily across despite the low speed. Let's jump onto that boat just to hear a little bit of the communications. So Nathan says, we've got a bit on here, and I think Pete immediately says to that, we could jibe.
I think we'll be okay.
Nave says, nah, I think we'll be okay. And, you know,
More speed for that feet, we'll be off. Let's get onto it, mate. So we're that's worth it. Board.
It's interesting, Pete is on starboard side, so you can't really see the cross. It's Nathan who can see it. But I think the reason Pete is calling it is because he's looking at the tactical app and calling it based on what's on his screen and what his screen is telling you. Basically, this call rests on his shoulders. And there you go, the off the foils. One last thing I want to show you about this, because I think it's pretty interesting, and it's that their mast effectively won't tack. And I think if you watch my video before and their kind of tacking procedure and the way the mast rotates linked with the foils, I think whatever sequencing of automation they've got between foils raising, rudder turning, it's not triggered this mast rotation. So if you look in the middle of the screen there, you can see for whatever reason, this mast is not rotating onto the new tack. So go down again with the foil, drops it, relifts it. Okay, here we go. And obviously the mast rotates and it rotates more. So you can just see how that mast rotation is linked into what they're doing in the foils. No real point looking into the data for that race, because I think INEOS were just kind of getting around the course and Team New Zealand were obviously chasing, but you don't want to chase too hard because you want to stay just on the foils, and if they fall off you just want to be lurking. So I'm just going to show you the pre-start here with INEOS. And again, I kind of joked about it in the live feed that INEOS is going to go for their tack around the pin option, which is what they did in race 3 when they got completely outfoxed by Team New Zealand and got the penalty. Yes, they did go for it again. And at this point, you're thinking, no, INEOS have been pinned up the course. I'm just going to cut across to a bit of video of the pre-start because I like the improved comms from INEOS. First thing that's important there, before they did their tack up, Dylan said they've jibed, whereas in the previous one when Team New Zealand caught them out, that wasn't communicated until... So Dylan says they come with us, tacking from here, Ben. So instead of bearing away and then potentially getting dialed down, Dylan's already made the call that they're going to tack. And it's still not fantastic because they're being held out the top of the course. But what they're really able to do from here is twice reach over the top of Team New Zealand. They tack underneath, so again, just they seem to have really tightened up the communication of instantly as they complete a manoeuvre, the other helmsman is straight away saying what Team New Zealand have done, which wasn't the case, and I think why they kind of ended up a little bit surprised on that previous pre-start. So some obvious kind of implementations of improvements from INEOS there. Let's have a little look at the data of race 6. Quite a large advantage in Upwind VMG, and this is the first race they've really had that. They've been close on VMG, maybe marginally ahead Upwind, but here they were kind of almost 25 knots. Team New Zealand's medium VMG. This is filtered for straight line foiling, but then, so it doesn't include tax, but then medium VMG is, I don't know, maybe 22.5. So actually a pretty big difference between the teams. You can see boat speed, INEOS maybe a bit down, but true wind angle, INEOS a lot closer to the wind. So obviously 30 degrees true wind angle at the bottom, 50 there. So they're closer. They're just sailing much closer to the breeze on INEOS. Really encouraging numbers for INEOS. By far the best we've seen. Downwind, again, marginally ahead on the downwind VMG, which we've seen before, so not a big change there. And again, a lot of this not actually going faster, so they're actually going slower, 38 knots boat speed compared to probably 38.5 median. But their VMG is slightly better because they are sailing lower downwind. So obviously these numbers as they go up, that's closer to 180 degrees true wind angle, which is dead downwind, so they're saying closer to dead downwind. But the race was still pretty close. So we've talked about the kind of tacking advantage, but maybe there was still a tacking advantage. This is tacks and jibes in that race, and speed going in, New Zealand doing more of a speed build into the tacks, but still drop quite a lot, but come out with more speed. When we look at the true wind angle, yeah, Team New Zealand actually doing more of a bear way, but INEOS generally say higher at wind anyway, and coming out more on similar angles, whereas previous days INEOS were tending to come out the tack slightly lower to do their build, but now they're more similar. If we look at VMG, you can see INEOS better VMGs going in. We've already said they get much better VMGs at wind, so you can see that in the entry to the tacks. But coming out, INEOS still lower VMG on the exit of the tacks, so are losing a bit through the tacks. And again, you see in the distance lost, INEOS are losing more. But I don't think that actually really explains why the race was so close, because there's two things to note about this race. First of all, INEOS's tactics. So yeah, this is the end of the race, and the thing to note here, if I just circle it, is the number of tacks and jibes. GBR 27 tacks and jibes. If we go back to race 4, GBR is 31 tacks and jibes, so a lot more. And this, I remind you, race 4 was only a 3-lap race, whereas today's was a 4-lap. So yeah, and you can just see if I scroll through this race, just how much Team New Zealand are facing them, especially on the beats, on the tacks, really bouncing INEOS around. So lots of manoeuvres. Let's have a look at the race. INEOS don't do any facing tacks. They're well aware of their disadvantages in the tacks, and they're just sailing for pressure, letting the boat speed do the talking, so keeping the manoeuvres down. Now, Team New Zealand do come back into this race. Chart down here, this bottom is whether they're on the favoured shift. You can see Team New Zealand on a big shift for a long time coming down this run, and that is that's here. So that's on the second run. Back upwind again. I think they get a small gain into this top mark, just a little gain, but again down the run, this first drive, especially where they start coming into this boundary, they seem to be getting a little lefty in this boundary, and that seems to be taking them down the edge of the course, and that's where they make these two big gains. Again, you can see time on favoured tack shift going up there. So yeah, I can see one big gain there, one big gain there on these two shifts. So I think that's what brings Team New Zealand back into the race. Now, INEOS say they don't do many covering tacks, but what I do like about this race is they pick two perfect times to do facing tacks. So by this point, Team New Zealand has just gained down the left-hand side of the course on 2 runs, and INEOS do their first facing tack to stop Team New Zealand going to this left-hand side, and that basically sets them up basically to defend up this beat. They still take that side down the run. Team New Zealand coming back into them. INEOS are just ahead, but INEOS do their second facing manoeuvre, so they jibe on the face of Team New Zealand. Obviously, already said Team New Zealand making these gains just down this kind of port side of the course, left-hand side of the course boundary, and INEOS again just facing on this gyre just to stop them getting to that advantage. So yeah, kind of nice. Just get this crossover, the dial down from Team New Zealand into the finish. But yeah, Team New Zealand coming back with a couple of good shifts, especially on the downwinds. But INEOS recognising that, reacting to it, and they didn't do much covering tacks or covering jives, but when they did, they were hugely effective. I think the kind of flip side to that, while Team New Zealand did come back into that race, they needed 2 really good kind of knocking shifts on the downwind to get back into it. And looking at data, INEOS were really quick. So if INEOS can win the starts and get into a roll, I think it's going to be pretty tricky for Team New Zealand to come back. They are going to have to really have some shifts fall their way. I also think the conditions with a slightly bigger sea state favoured INEOS because of their full configuration. We knew against Luna Rossa, INEOS did quite well in the waves just from the way Luna Rossa's toucan beak on the top of the full was clipping waves. And I think that forces Luna Rossa and Team New Zealand have the same feature, is to sail with more heave up and down through the waves, keep the boat going up and down, so that toucan beak is not smashing the waves too much, and it does seem to slow the boat down when that catches. INEOS seem a little bit happy just to keep a steadier heave and just kind of plough along and kind of accept variable immersion on their foil arm, but also their hull with the deep bustle as well, kind of keeps it sealed, but with waves splashing past every now and then on that kind of thin skeg doesn't seem to hurt them quite as much. So maybe the conditions did give an extra helping hand to INEOS today, but still a really close, exciting race. I'm not sure what we're going to get later in the week. I think the forecast is similar breeze, but a little bit more wave state. So again, that could shift momentum back Team New Zealand's way. But the good news is we are definitely going to get racing at the weekend now. It won't be a whitewash on Friday. And I think we all want to see more racing from these 2 great teams. Yeah, stick around and see you shortly.